The first warning came at 3 in the morning, when every satellite in Earth's orbit suddenly went dark. Colonel Marcus Webb was halfway through his third cup of coffee when his screen flickered and died. He stared at the blank monitor for exactly 2 seconds before his training kicked in. Within minutes, he was on the phone with command centers across the globe, piecing together what would later be called the longest day in human history. The Craxian fleet appeared above Earth like a swarm of metallic locusts. Their ships blotted out the stars, casting shadows across entire continents. The aliens had conquered 47 worlds across 3 galaxies. Their military doctrine was simple and brutal: overwhelm the enemy with superior numbers, superior firepower, and superior technology. It had never failed them. They expected Earth to fall within 72 hours. Commander Zethkor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched the blue planet rotate slowly beneath him. His species had evolved on a world of endless plains, where size and strength determined survival. The Craxians were tall, nearly 3 meters, with thick gray skin and 4 muscular arms. They had never lost a war because they had never faced an enemy who could match their physical power or their fleet's firepower. "Begin the standard subjugation protocol," Zethkor ordered. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Destroy their military installations first, then their communication networks. By the time their leaders realize what is happening, it will already be over." The first plasma bombardment hit a naval base in the Pacific. The explosion was visible from space, a bright orange flower blooming against the dark ocean. Zethkor expected panic. He expected surrender. What he got was something entirely different. Marcus Webb had spent 20 years studying military history. He knew every great battle ever fought on Earth, from Thermopylae to Stalingrad. He understood that humans had always found ways to overcome stronger enemies. The key was never to fight the battle your enemy wanted you to fight. You had to change the rules. "They're hitting our bases one by one," General Patricia Shaw said during the emergency meeting. She was a small woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. "Our conventional forces can't touch them. Their shields absorb everything we throw at them." "Then we stop throwing conventional weapons," Marcus replied. He pulled up a holographic display of the enemy fleet. "Look at their formation, it's perfect. Every ship is exactly where it should be for maximum firepower coverage. They've done this before, many times." "How does that help us?" another officer asked. Marcus smiled. It was not a pleasant smile, because perfect formations are predictable. They're using the same tactics that conquered 47 worlds. They don't know how to improvise. They've never had to. On the other side of the world, Dr. Elena Vasquez was running through the corridors of her research facility. She was a physicist who had spent her career studying theoretical energy patterns. Now her theories were about to be tested in the most extreme way possible. "The alien shields operate on a rotating frequency," she explained to the gathered military leaders via a secure connection. "They cycle through thousands of different energy signatures every second. That's why our weapons can't penetrate them. By the time the missile reaches the shield, the frequency has already changed." "Can you find a pattern?" Marcus asked. Elena nodded. "I already have. The rotation isn't random. It follows a mathematical sequence. If we can predict where the frequency will be at any given moment, we can tune our weapons to match it." The first counterattack came at dawn. The Craxians were not expecting it. Their doctrine stated that primitive species always surrendered after the initial bombardment. There was no protocol for a species that fought back. A squadron of modified fighter jets streaked across the sky toward the nearest Craxian cruiser. The aliens watched them approach with something like amusement. These tiny craft posed no threat. Their shields could absorb nuclear warheads. What could such small weapons possibly do? The first missile hit the cruiser's shield and passed through it like a knife through water. The explosion tore through the ship's hull, sending it spinning toward the Earth in a trail of fire and smoke. For the first time in recorded Craxian history, one of their warships had been destroyed by a lesser species. Commander Zethkor received the news with disbelief. "Impossible," he growled. "Run a diagnostic on our shield systems. There must be a malfunction." "No malfunction, Commander," his tactical officer reported. "The humans somehow predicted our shield frequency. They tuned their weapon to match it perfectly." Zethkor's four fists clenched in anger. "Then we change the frequency rotation. Make it random, truly random." But randomness, Marcus Webb knew, was the enemy of efficiency. The Craxian ships relied on their shield systems to work in perfect harmony. When each ship began using its own random frequency, they could no longer coordinate their defensive patterns. Ships that once protected each other now had gaps in their coverage. The second human attack came from an unexpected direction. While the aliens focused on the sky, a team of submarines had been moving into position beneath the ocean. The Craxians had scanned the land and the air, but they had never considered that a species might wage war from beneath the water. Their homeworld had no oceans. The concept was utterly foreign to them. The submarines launched a volley of torpedoes modified with Elena's frequency-matching technology. They struck the underside of a Craxian troop carrier that was hovering over the Atlantic, preparing to deploy ground forces. The carrier cracked open like an egg, spilling soldiers and equipment into the cold water below. Zethkor watched another of his ships fall. "What kind of species is this?" he demanded. "They attack from above and below. They use weapons we've never seen. How is this possible?" His science officer studied the data streaming across his console. "Commander, their technology is primitive compared to ours, but they're using it in ways we never anticipated. They're adapting faster than we can respond." This was the heart of human strategy. The Craxians had conquered world after world using the same tactics because those tactics always worked. They had no reason to develop new ones, but humans had spent their entire history fighting each other. They had learned that victory went not to the strongest army, but to the most creative commanders. Marcus Webb understood this better than anyone. He had studied how small forces had defeated larger ones throughout history. The Vietnamese against the Americans, the Finns against the Soviets, the Greeks against the Persians. The pattern was always the same. When you couldn't win through strength, you won through cunning. "We need to keep them off balance," Marcus told his team. "The moment they figure out one tactic, we switch to another. We never give them time to adapt." General Shaw nodded grimly. "What about civilian casualties? They're still bombing our cities." "We'll give them other targets," Marcus replied. "Decoys, false signals. Let them waste their ammunition on empty buildings while we prepare the next phase." The next phase was something no alien species had ever encountered. Humanity was about to teach the Craxians a lesson in guerrilla warfare. On the ground, in cities around the world, ordinary people were becoming soldiers, not with guns and tanks, but with the tools they used every day. Hackers broke into Craxian communication systems and filled them with garbage data. Engineers built devices that jammed alien sensors. Factory workers repurposed manufacturing equipment to produce makeshift weapons. The Craxians had prepared for an army. They had not prepared for a species where everyone was a potential combatant. Their ground troops, each one stronger than 10 human soldiers, found themselves fighting shadows. Every building could hide an enemy. Every rooftop could conceal a sniper. Every basement could be a trap. Commander Zethkor looked at the tactical display showing his forces scattered across Earth's surface. They were taking casualties at a rate that should have been impossible. The humans were not fighting fair. They were not fighting by any rules the Craxians recognized. "Perhaps," his first officer suggested carefully, "we should request reinforcements." Zethkor's response was a low growl of frustration. In all his years of conquest, he had never needed reinforcements. He had never even considered the possibility. But now, Watching his ships fall and his soldiers die, he was beginning to understand something that humans had known for thousands of years. In war, there are no rules. There is only survival. The first day ended with the Craxian fleet still dominant in orbit, but their ground invasion stalled. They had expected to be accepting Earth's surrender by now. Instead, they were counting their losses and wondering what would come next. Marcus Webb stood at his command center looking at reports from around the world. The news was bad but not hopeless. Millions of people had died. Entire cities had been destroyed. But humanity was still fighting. And as long as they kept fighting, there was a chance. "Sir," one of his aides said, "the president wants to know how long we can hold out." Marcus considered the question carefully. The truth was, he did not know. He only knew that they would keep fighting until they won or until there was no one left to fight. "Tell the president," he said, "that we're just getting started." As the sun rose on the second day of the invasion, both sides knew that this war would not end quickly. The Craxians had conquered 47 worlds, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. And humanity, for all its divisions and conflicts, had never been so united in purpose. The battle for Earth had only begun. The second day of the invasion dawned gray and cold. Smoke from burning cities had spread across the atmosphere, turning the sky into a canvas of orange and black. Commander Zethkor stood on his bridge and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. His fleet still controlled the space above Earth. His ships could still rain destruction on any target they chose. But the ground campaign had become a nightmare. His soldiers, the finest warriors in 3 galaxies, were being hunted through alien streets by creatures half their size. Every advance was met with ambushes. Every victory was followed by retreat. "How many did we lose overnight?" Zethkor asked. His tactical officer hesitated before answering. 1,700 ground troops, Commander, 3 patrol vessels, 1 cruiser. 1 cruiser. Zethkor's voice was dangerous. How did they destroy a cruiser during the night cycle? The humans launched an attack from their largest orbital facility. We didn't know they had weapons on their space station. They did not have weapons on their space station. What they had was a team of astronauts with engineering degrees and nothing to lose. Dr. James Cooper and his crew had spent the night dismantling their own station and turning the pieces into projectiles. When the Craxian cruiser passed within range, they had launched everything they had. The debris tore through the ship's sensors and left it blind. A follow-up missile strike from Earth did the rest. Marcus Webb received the news with a tired smile. "Remind me to recommend those astronauts for medals," he said. "What's the situation on the ground?" General Shaw pulled up a map showing red and blue markers scattered across every continent. "We've established guerrilla networks in every major city still standing. The aliens control the streets during the day, but we own the night. Their sensors aren't designed for urban environments. Too much interference from our electronics." "What about their communications?" "Alina's team cracked their encryption 12 hours ago. We're feeding them false intelligence. They think our main forces are gathered in the American Midwest. In reality, that area is mostly decoys." The decoys were another example of human creativity. Farmers had constructed fake military bases from plywood and sheet metal. Radio operators broadcast signals that mimicked military communications. From orbit, it looked like humanity was preparing for a conventional battle. The Craxians were more than happy to oblige. Zethkor ordered a massive bombardment of the Midwest. His ships poured fire onto empty fields and abandoned buildings. The explosions were spectacular. The strategic value was 0. While the aliens wasted their ammunition, real human forces were implementing a plan that would have seemed insane to any Craxian tactician. They were going to board an enemy ship. Captain Sarah Martinez had volunteered for the mission the moment she heard about it. She was a pilot who had spent her career flying experimental aircraft at the edge of space. Now, She was strapped into a modified cargo shuttle with 20 of the best Special Forces soldiers on Earth. "Remember," Marcus Webb's voice crackled through her headset, "the Craxians don't expect close combat in space. Their ships have excellent weapons for attacking other ships, but their internal security is minimal. They've never needed it." "Understood," Sarah replied. "We hit their engineering section first, take out the power core, then we extract." "Negative on the extract. You won't have time. This is a one-way trip." There was silence in the shuttle. Every soldier knew what Marcus was saying. They were not coming back. Their job was to destroy one ship and teach the Craxians a lesson. The lesson was that nowhere was safe. The shuttle launched from a hidden base in the Andes Mountains. It rose through the atmosphere on a trajectory designed to look like debris from the earlier fighting. The Craxian sensors tracked it briefly and then dismissed it as irrelevant. Sarah guided the shuttle toward her target, a command vessel that was coordinating ground operations in South America. She could see it growing larger through her viewport, a massive structure of dark metal and glowing lights. It was beautiful in a terrible way. 30 seconds to contact," she announced. "Everyone seal your suits. We're going in through the cargo bay." The shuttle hit the alien ship's hull with a sound like the end of the world. Automated cutting tools began slicing through the metal while soldiers checked their weapons. They had trained for zero-gravity combat, but none of them had ever done it for real. Today, they would learn fast or die. The first Craxian guard they encountered was nearly 3 meters tall with gray skin and 4 arms. It roared in surprise and reached for its weapon. 3 bullets caught it in the chest before it could fire. The rounds were made of a ceramic composite that Alina's team had designed specifically to penetrate alien armor. "Move," Sarah shouted. "We don't have much time." The humans spread through the ship like water flowing through cracks. The Craxians were larger, stronger, and better armed, but they were also confused. No enemy had ever boarded one of their vessels. They had no procedures for repelling invaders. They had no drills. They simply could not believe what was happening. In the command center, a junior officer tried to reach Commander Zethkor. "Emergency on the Thunderborn. We have hostile forces inside the ship. They're heading for engineering." Zethkor felt something he had not experienced in decades. Fear. How many? "Unknown. They're jamming our internal sensors. Commander, what should we do?" Zethkor had no answer. His entire military doctrine was built on never being in this situation. He had tactics for orbital bombardment, for ground assaults, for fleet battles. He had nothing for an enemy that appeared inside your own ship. Sarah Martinez reached the engineering section with 8 soldiers still alive. The rest had died fighting their way through the corridors. She looked at the alien power core and wondered briefly if she would feel anything when the explosion came. "Plant the charges," she ordered. "Maximum yield. We want to make sure this thing doesn't survive." One of her soldiers was wounded, bleeding from a gash across his arm. He looked at Sarah with eyes that had accepted death. "It was an honor, Captain." "The honor was mine," she replied. "All of yours." The explosion lit up the sky above South America. From Earth's surface, it looked like a new star had been born. The Thunderborn broke apart and fell toward the planet in a shower of burning debris. Sarah Martinez and her team were gone, but they had accomplished their mission. Commander Zethkor received the news in stunned silence. A boarding action. The humans had launched a boarding action against one of his command vessels. The concept was so foreign that he could barely process it. "How many ships do they have capable of reaching orbit?" he demanded. "Our scans show minimal space-faring capability," his science officer reported. "But Commander, they modified a cargo vessel to carry troops. We never anticipated that a primitive species would attempt such a maneuver." "Then start anticipating. These creatures are not behaving according to any model we have." The truth was beginning to dawn on the Craxian commander. The humans were not fighting like any species he had encountered before. They did not follow rules. They did not respect the proper order of battle. They did whatever it took to win, regardless of the cost to themselves. On Earth, Marcus Webb was explaining the next phase of the plan to a room full of exhausted military leaders. "We've proven that we can hurt them," he said. "Now we need to prove that we can drive them back." "With what resources?" General Shaw asked. "We've lost half our air force. Our ground troops are scattered. We're running low on missiles that can actually penetrate their shields." "Then we use resources we haven't tried yet." Marcus pointed to a map of the ocean. "The Craxians still don't understand water. They don't have it on their homeworld. Every time we attack from the ocean, they're caught off guard." "You want to use the submarine fleet?" "I want to use everything in the ocean. Every ship, every submarine, every research vessel. We're going to create a mobile command center that they can't track because it keeps moving through a medium they don't comprehend." The ocean strategy was born from desperation and genius. Human ships began coordinating attacks from beneath the waves, surfacing to strike, and then diving again before the aliens could respond. The Craxians tried to boil the oceans with their weapons, but water dispersed energy in ways their targeting computers couldn't predict. For every ship they destroyed, two more appeared somewhere else. Dr. Elena Vasquez, meanwhile, had made another breakthrough. The alien shields were not just defensive. They also regulated power flow throughout each ship. If you could disrupt the shields in a specific way, you could cause a cascade failure in the ship's entire electrical system. "I need to get closer to one of their ships," she told Marcus. "Close enough to scan its shield harmonics in detail. Then I can design a weapon that will work on all of them." "That's suicide." "So was the boarding action. So is everything we're doing, but it's our only chance." Marcus was silent for a long moment, then he nodded. "I'll find you a pilot." The pilot's name was Lieutenant David Chen. He had grown up in San Francisco, learned to fly in the Navy, and had always dreamed of going to space. He got his wish, though not in the way he had imagined. David's ship was a modified stealth aircraft, rebuilt with equipment that Elena had designed. It could approach an alien vessel undetected if everything worked perfectly. The margin for error was zero. "You'll have about 30 seconds once you're in scanning range," Elena explained. "After that, their sensors will pick you up and you'll have to run." "30 seconds is a long time," David replied with a confidence he did not feel. "I'll get you what you need." The mission launched at midnight. David flew his ship through the upper atmosphere, weaving between pieces of debris and destroyed satellites. The Craxian fleet hung above him like a ceiling of metal and light. He chose his target, a destroyer that had been damaged in earlier fighting, and began his approach. The scanning equipment hummed as he drew closer. Data streamed across his screens, information about shield frequencies and power distributions. Elena was right. There was a pattern here, a weakness that could be exploited. 20 seconds. David's hands were steady on the controls. 15 seconds. An alarm began to sound. The aliens had detected him. 10 seconds. Plasma fire streaked past his cockpit. 5 seconds. A hit on his left wing. The ship shuddered and began to spin. 0. The scan was complete. David transmitted the data back to Earth as his ship fell toward the planet. He had time to think about his family, his friends, the life he would never have. Then there was only fire and silence. Elena received the data in her underground lab. Her hands were shaking as she analyzed it. David Chen had given his life for this information. She would not let his sacrifice be wasted. "I can do it," she announced to the gathered military leaders. "I can build a weapon that will disable their entire fleet, but I need time, at least 3 more days." "We'll give you 3 days," Marcus replied. "Whatever it takes." Whatever it took. That phrase defined humanity's response to the invasion. Ordinary people did extraordinary things. Factory workers built weapons. Teachers organized resistance cells. Children carried messages between hidden outposts. Everyone contributed something. The Craxians could not understand it. Their society was hierarchical and rigid. Soldiers fought. Workers worked. Leaders led. The idea that every individual could be a threat was incomprehensible. Commander Zethkor looked at the losses mounting on his display and made a decision. He would request reinforcements, not because he needed them to win, he told himself, but to accelerate the conquest. The longer this took, the worse it looked for his career. The message went out to the nearest Craxian base. Help was coming. In the meantime, Zethkor would show these humans what happened to species that refused to surrender. The bombardment began at dawn on the third day. This time there were no military targets. The Craxians were simply destroying cities. Their message was clear: surrender or die. Marcus Webb watched the destruction from his command center. Each explosion was a failure. Each death was a life he could not protect. But he also saw something else in the reports. The attacks were becoming less precise. The aliens were frustrated, angry, making mistakes. They're losing their discipline, he observed. That's when enemies are most dangerous, but also most vulnerable. We just need to hold on a little longer, General Shaw said. Elena's almost ready. 3 more days. That was all humanity needed. 3 more days of fighting, dying, and refusing to give up. 3 more days of tactics and tricks and desperate measures. The question was whether Earth would still be standing when those days were done. The 4th day began with rain. Ash from burning cities had seeded the clouds, and now dark water fell across the planet like tears. Commander Zethkor stood on his bridge and watched his invasion crumbling around him. His ground forces had been decimated. More than half his soldiers were dead or missing. The humans had developed new tactics overnight, using the rain and reduced visibility to launch coordinated attacks. They appeared from nowhere, struck hard, and vanished before his troops could respond. Status report, Zethkor demanded. We have lost control of 17% of occupied territory in the last 12 hours, his tactical officer reported. Our forces are being pushed back toward the landing zones. Pushed back by what army? There is no army, Commander. The resistance appears to be decentralized. Individual cells operating independently but toward common objectives. This was the heart of human guerrilla doctrine. Each resistance cell made its own decisions based on local conditions. There was no central command to destroy, no leader to assassinate. Kill 1 cell and 3 more would take its place. The Craxians were fighting an enemy that was everywhere and nowhere. In a bunker beneath what had once been Geneva, Marcus Webb was coordinating the global response. His screens showed a web of communication lines connecting resistance groups across the planet. Each group had its own specialty. Some focused on sabotage, some on rescue operations, some on intelligence gathering. Together, they were slowly strangling the alien occupation. The Northern European cells have cut power to the main Craxian supply depot, one of his officers reported. They're estimating 6 hours before the aliens can restore it. Good, what about the South American operation? 3 enemy patrol ships destroyed. Our submarine groups are maintaining pressure on their coastal positions. Marcus nodded. The strategy was working. Every day, the Craxians controlled a little less territory. Every day, they lost a few more ships. The question was whether humanity could keep this up long enough for Elena to complete her weapon. Dr. Elena Vasquez had not slept in 48 hours. Her lab was filled with equipment salvaged from destroyed alien technology, and her team was working around the clock to build something that had never existed before. A device that could shut down every Craxian ship in orbit with a single activation. The principle is simple, she explained to her exhausted colleagues. Their shields operate on a harmonic frequency. If we can generate a counterharmonic, we can cause a feedback loop that will overload their entire power system. Simple in principle, one of her engineers replied. Impossible in practice. We don't have the power source to generate a signal that's strong. We do. Alina pointed to a diagram on her screen. If we can capture one of their atmospheric fighters intact, we can use its power core to amplify our signal. Capturing an enemy fighter was easier said than done. These ships were fast, maneuverable, and deadly. Human pilots had scored some victories against them, but only through sacrifice and luck. To capture one intact would require something unprecedented. That something came from an unexpected source. A team of farmers in rural Canada had been observing Craxian patrol patterns for days. They noticed that one particular fighter always passed over their land at the same time each morning. They set a trap. The trap was absurdly simple. A net made from industrial cables, suspended between two silos, hidden by holographic projectors that made it look like empty sky. When the fighter flew through, the net tangled its engines. The ship crashed in a wheat field, damaged but intact. Its pilot did not survive, but its power core did. How did farmers capture an alien spacecraft? General Shaw asked in disbelief. The same way humans have always caught things, Marcus replied. Patience, observation, and a really big net. The power core arrived at Alina's lab under heavy guard. She worked through another sleepless night, integrating the alien technology with human engineering. The result was ugly, held together with tape and prayer, but it worked. Probably. There's no way to test this without alerting them, Alina warned. We get one shot. If it fails, they'll know what we're trying to do and they'll adjust their systems. Then we don't fail, Marcus said simply. Commander Zethkor, meanwhile, was dealing with problems of his own. The reinforcement fleet had arrived, but their commander was demanding answers before committing his ships to battle. You've lost how many vessels? Fleet Admiral Vornthaw's voice carried undisguised contempt. To a species that hadn't even achieved interstellar travel. The humans are unconventional, Zethkor tried to explain. They don't fight according to any recognized doctrine. Unconventional. You've been outmaneuvered by primitives, Zethkor. This is an embarrassment to the Empire. Vornthaw was a traditionalist who believed in overwhelming force applied without mercy. He took command of the combined fleet and ordered every ship into Earth's atmosphere. No more orbital bombardment. They would burn the planet clean, city by city, until nothing remained. The descent of the Craxian fleet was terrifying to behold. Hundreds of ships blocking out the sky, weapons charging, ready to reduce Earth to ash. In bunkers and basements around the world, humans watched and waited and refused to give up. Alina, Marcus said over a secure channel, tell me you're ready. Almost. I need 30 more minutes. You have 15. They're starting their attack run. The first wave of destruction hit the Asian continent. Cities that had survived the initial invasion were now being systematically destroyed. The Craxians were done playing games. They would accept nothing less than total annihilation. Alina's hands flew over her controls. The device was almost ready, but almost wasn't good enough. She needed to boost the signal strength, refine the harmonic frequency, and pray that her calculations were correct. 10 minutes, Marcus warned. I know. The second wave hit Europe. Ancient cities with thousands of years of history vanished in seconds. The Craxians felt no remorse. They had done this before many times. It was simply the natural order of things. The strong destroyed the weak. 5 minutes, Alina, please. The device hummed to life. Alina watched the readings climb toward the threshold she needed. Just a little more, just a little more. 2 minutes. The fleet was approaching the Americas now, the last major concentration of human resistance. Once it was gone, Earth would fall. 1 minute. Alina looked at her device. It was ready. It had to be ready. "Now," she said, "activate it now." The signal went out from Alina's lab, amplified by the captured alien power core, spreading across the planet at the speed of light. It was invisible to human senses, but to the Craxian ships, it was catastrophic. The first ship lost power at 12,000 meters. Its lights flickered and died, its engines cut out, and it began to fall toward the ocean. Then another ship lost power. Then another. Then dozens. Commander Zethkor watched in horror as his fleet began dropping from the sky. Ships that had conquered empires were now falling like stones. Their shields were gone. Their weapons were dead. They were helpless. "What's happening?" Fleet Admiral Vorntha screamed over the communication system. "What have they done to us?" "The humans," Zethkor whispered. "They've turned our own technology against us." The flagship still had power, but barely. Its systems were flickering, struggling against the counter-harmonic signal. Zethkor knew he had seconds to make a decision: fight and die, or retreat and live. He chose retreat. "All ships that can still maneuver break orbit. Get us out of the atmosphere." A handful of vessels responded. They clawed their way upward, fighting against gravity and their own failing systems. Behind them, the rest of the fleet crashed to Earth. Marcus Webb watched the enemy ships fall and felt something he had not allowed himself to feel since the invasion began: hope. "It worked," General Shaw said quietly. "Alina's device actually worked." "It worked," Marcus agreed. "But they're not done yet. Some of them got away." The surviving Craxian ships regrouped in orbit. They were fewer now, much fewer, but they were still dangerous. And they were angry. "They'll try again," Alina said, joining Marcus in the command center. She looked like she might collapse at any moment. "Once they figure out what we did, they'll adapt." "How long do we have?" "Days, maybe a week. They'll need to redesign their entire shield system." Days, a week. It was not much time, but it was more than they had before. And in that time, humanity would not be idle. The word spread across the planet. The alien fleet was crippled. Their ships were falling from the sky. For the first time since the invasion began, humans dared to believe they might actually win. The resistance groups that had been fighting defensive actions now went on the offensive. They attacked Craxian ground forces who had lost air support. They liberated captured territories. They rescued prisoners and salvaged alien technology. Commander Zethkor looked at the wreckage of his invasion and knew that everything had changed. These humans were not just fighting for their planet. They were fighting for their right to exist. And they were willing to do anything, sacrifice anything, to ensure that existence continued. For the first time in his long career of conquest, Zethkor considered the possibility that he might lose. The fifth day dawned clear and bright. The smoke had finally cleared, and Earth's sky was blue again. Commander Zethkor stood on the bridge of his battered flagship and counted his remaining ships. 47. From a fleet of over 300, only 47 remained operational. Fleet Admiral Vorntha had not survived. His ship had crashed into the Pacific Ocean, taking him and his contempt to the bottom. Zethkor was once again in command, though there was little left to command. "The shield modifications are complete," his chief engineer reported. "We've randomized the harmonic frequencies completely. The human device will not work on us again." "And our ground forces?" "Scattered. Most are cut off from supply lines. They're fighting in isolated groups throughout the planet." Zethkor made a decision. The ground forces were lost. There was no point in trying to save them. What mattered now was preserving what remained of the fleet and finding a new strategy. "We retreat to high orbit," he ordered, "beyond the range of their weapons. We wait for new reinforcements and then we begin again." "Commander, that could take months." "Then it takes months. We've lost this battle, but we will not lose this war." On Earth, Marcus Webb received intelligence about the Craxian retreat. The aliens were pulling back, but they were not leaving. They were waiting in orbit, watching, planning their next move. "We've bought ourselves time," Marcus told his assembled commanders. "But they'll be back. We need to be ready." "How do we fight them in space?" General Shaw asked. "We don't have a fleet." "Then we build one." The rebuilding began immediately. Factories that had been hidden underground resumed production. Scientists who had been working in secret shared their discoveries. The captured alien technology was studied, reverse-engineered, and adapted for human use. Elena Vasquez led the effort to understand Craxian propulsion systems. "Their ships use a form of gravity manipulation," she explained. "We can't replicate it exactly, but we can achieve something similar using electromagnetic fields." Within weeks, the first human spacecraft capable of reaching high orbit was completed. It was ugly, a patchwork of human and alien technology, but it flew. And where one ship could fly, others could follow. The Craxians watched from their orbital position as human spacecraft began to appear. First one, then 10, then dozens. The primitives were building a navy. It was laughable. Their ships were crude, barely able to maneuver. They could not possibly challenge a Craxian fleet. But Commander Zethkor had learned to stop underestimating humans. "What are they planning?" he wondered aloud. His science officer studied the human ships through long-range sensors. They appear to be establishing defensive positions around their planet, a perimeter of some kind. "A perimeter won't stop us. We can punch through any defensive line." "With respect, Commander, that's what we thought before." Zethkor growled in frustration. The science officer was right. Everything they had thought about humans had been wrong. Why should this be any different? Marcus Webb knew exactly what the aliens were thinking. They were looking at Earth's new space fleet and seeing a defensive barrier. What they were not seeing was the real plan. "We're not trying to stop them from reaching Earth," Marcus explained to his commanders. "We're trying to reach them." The human ships were not just defenders. They were carriers. Each one held a team of soldiers equipped with the weapons and tactics that had proven so effective in the boarding action. The plan was simple and audacious. Attack the Craxian fleet directly, ship by ship, until nothing remained. "It's suicide," General Shaw said. "So was everything else we've done. The aliens expect us to wait for them to attack. They expect us to be defensive. They've never faced a species that would take the fight to them in their own territory." The attack came on a moonless night. Human ships launched from every continent, their engines burning bright against the darkness. The Craxians detected them immediately and prepared for battle. "They're coming to us." Zethkor could not believe it. "Their ships are inferior in every way. What do they hope to accomplish?" "Unknown, Commander. Their tactics are erratic." The human ships did not behave like a fleet. They scattered, approaching from different angles, varying their speeds, refusing to form any recognizable pattern. The Craxian targeting computers struggled to lock onto targets that moved unpredictably. "Fire at will," Zethkor ordered. "Destroy them all." The Craxian weapons were powerful, but they were designed for battles between orderly formations. The chaotic human approach made them less effective. Ships that should have been destroyed survived through luck and evasion. Others sacrificed themselves to draw fire away from their comrades. Captain Sarah Martinez had died in the first boarding action, but her tactics lived on. The new wave of boarders were her students, trained in techniques she had developed. They slammed their ships against Craxian hulls and cut their way inside. Zethkor watched as lights began to go out across his fleet. Internal explosions, fires spreading through corridors, reports of hand-to-hand combat on a dozen ships. The humans were inside his fleet, tearing it apart from within. "How is this happening?" he demanded. "Our warriors are stronger, our weapons are better." "The humans fight without regard for their own lives," his tactical officer replied grimly. "They use themselves as weapons. Our soldiers are not trained to face enemies who embrace death." This was the final lesson humanity would teach the Craxians. The aliens fought to conquer and survive. Humans fought for something larger than themselves, for their families, their homes, their future. They were willing to die because they believed that their deaths would mean something. The battle raged for hours. Ship after ship fell, some to external weapons, some to internal sabotage, some to the desperate courage of human soldiers who refused to give up. By dawn, the Craxian fleet had been reduced to a handful of vessels, barely enough to fill the fingers of one hand. Commander Zethkor's flagship was surrounded. Human ships held position around it, weapons ready, waiting for his decision. "Commander," one of his officers said, "we should surrender." Surrender. In all of Craxian history, no commander had ever surrendered to a lesser species. The shame would follow his family for generations, but the alternative was death, and death served no purpose. "Open a channel to the humans," Zethkor ordered. Marcus Webb's face appeared on the Craxian viewscreen. The human looked exhausted, his eyes ringed with dark circles, but there was no weakness in his expression. "Commander Zethkor," Marcus said, "I believe we have some things to discuss." The surrender negotiations took place in orbit, aboard a neutral station hastily constructed for the purpose. Commander Zethkor sat across from a delegation of human leaders, still struggling to understand how everything had gone so wrong. "You were supposed to fall in 3 days," he said. "Every model we had predicted it. How did you survive?" Marcus considered the question. "You treated war as a science, something predictable with rules that could be calculated and followed. We treated it as an art, something that requires creativity, improvisation, and sacrifice. Your species is willing to die for victory. We fight to survive." "No," Marcus corrected. "We fight to ensure that others can survive. There's a difference." The peace treaty was unlike anything the Craxian Empire had ever signed. Earth would remain independent. The aliens would withdraw completely. In exchange, humanity agreed to share certain technological innovations, particularly Dr. Vasquez's work on energy harmonics. It was not a complete victory. Millions of humans had died. Cities had been destroyed. The scars of the invasion would take generations to heal, but Earth was free, and that was what mattered. In the years that followed, Earth joined the galactic community as a sovereign power. Other species looked at humanity with a mixture of fear and respect. These small, fragile creatures had defeated the greatest military force in 3 galaxies. How? The answer became a subject of study for generations of alien scholars. The answer, Marcus Webb knew, was simple. Humans were not the strongest species or the smartest or the most advanced, but they were creative. They were adaptable. They were willing to sacrifice everything for each other. And they never, ever gave up. Commander Zethkor eventually wrote a book about the invasion. It became required reading in military academies across the galaxy. The title translated roughly to How to Lose to Humans, Lessons from Earth. The book's final chapter contained a warning for any species considering an attack on Earth. "Do not underestimate them," Zethkor wrote. "They are not what they appear to be. Behind their small bodies and primitive technology lies a spirit that cannot be conquered. They will surprise you. They will outthink you. And if you push them far enough, they will destroy you." We came to Earth expecting to find another conquered world. What we found instead was our greatest defeat. The humans taught us that true power is not measured in ships or weapons. It is measured in the willingness to fight for what you believe in, no matter the cost. Elena Vasquez was awarded the highest honors humanity could bestow. She used her fame to advocate for peaceful cooperation with other species, arguing that the same creativity that had won the war could build a better future. Marcus Webb retired from military service and spent his remaining years teaching strategy to young officers. His lectures always began with the same words: "Never fight the battle your enemy wants you to fight. Always change the rules." The invasion was over, but its legacy endured. Humanity had proven something to the galaxy and to themselves. They were small, yes. Young, yes. Primitive by some standards. But they were also fierce, clever, and unbreakable. And woe to any species that forgot it.